Welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe. And during the same week that the current government shutdown became the second longest government shutdown in history, the gross national debt of the United States reached $38 trillion. But here's the really startling part of that debt milestone. $38 trillion comes just a little more than 2 months after we hit $37 trillion back in mid-August. So how can we get back to some fiscal sanity and settle this impasse? Let's ask our guest this week on the AZ Political Podcast, former Congressman Matt Salmon.
Hi.
It's good to have you on the podcast again. So for those who don't know, Congressman Salmon was in Congress the last time a complete federal budget for an entire fiscal year was actually passed and signed, not as a series of continuing resolutions that have, sustained the government and led to shutdowns through the years. And it was a balanced budget, too, passed at a time when the Republicans were in control of the House and the Senate, and there was a Democrat in the White House.
Bill Clinton.
It almost seems like an impossibility in today's day and age.
It's not impossible. It just takes willpower, and it takes both sides swallowing hard and doing what they've got to do.
So how did you guys do it? You just came off the Republican Revolution, during Clinton's
the contract
midterm?
with America.
Yeah,
and it was right after Clinton's midterm. And not only did we balance the budget, it wasn't a one-off. We did it 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And when I left, we had over $100 billion surplus. So I think it was $140 billion surplus.
Wow.
And then Bush got elected and went right back into deficit spending. It was very, very frustrating for me because when I first ran for Congress, the federal debt was at $5 trillion. And I was apoplectic about that.
Mm-hmm.
I was very, very concerned that we were on a path to fiscal ruin. And that was the single issue that I ran on.
Yeah.
And, look at it now, $38 trillion. And the interest on the debt, just the interest that we pay on the federal debt now is as much as we pay for all of our funding for military.
It really is insane. But how did you get a budget passed? That's the question, because right now we have had CR after CR and omnibus bills. And all
I was there for 6 years in the 90s, and we passed the 12 appropriation bills every year that I was there. Then I went back. I was one of these guys. I took the term limit pledge and served 6 years. And I sat out for 12, and I came back when Obama was president. It was completely different. I mean, everything was topsy-turvy. And that's when we were right in the midst of these CRs and kicking the can down the road. And, no partisan working together, bipartisanship. It was crazy, and it's even worse now.
So we have to frame this in the time that this happened in the 90s. Bill Clinton took office. Hillary Clinton took the mantle. She was going to reform healthcare,
right?
And so government was going to become much, much bigger, and it did, and it continued to get bigger under Republican presidents as well, right?
It did. But it did, and it's getting bigger now.
How did you get to a place, though, where you could actually pass a federal budget and avoid like what we're going through right now, a shutdown?
Well, for one thing, we were able to successfully push through the House and the Senate several times different measures. Like we did a major welfare reform bill. Mm-hmm. We called it workfare.
Right.
That required that people had to actually work for their benefits. They didn't get them for nothing. And Bill Clinton vetoed it the first time. He vetoed it the second time. And the third time, not only did he sign the exact same language on the bill, but he took credit for it. You know what? And I was okay with that because it actually got into law.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that we were able to do. Now, we had a strong economy, and we also put some tax cuts in place at that time. And Bill Clinton, to his credit, got up, I think it was 1998, in his State of the Union speech, and proclaimed the era of big government is over.
Right.
And you know what?
He was not exactly a Miss Rita, the psychic, was he?
No, and I don't think a guy like Bill Clinton could get elected today on the Democrat side. I just don't.
And is that why we've seen, some of the most strident holding out for, ACA benefits are so-called moderate Democrats like Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego, who has really fashioned himself much more as a moderate these days. They're
I
a
still
couple of
have
the
a
big
hard time
holdouts.
looking at him as a moderate. I served with him in the House.
Right.
And he was one of the most liberal people in the whole Democrat conference.
Right.
In fact, he was either the vice chair or anyway, he was very high up in the progressive caucus at the time. So I still have a hard time viewing him as a changed being.
Right. But Senator Kelly certainly, challenged President Biden on the border and some other things seen as a moderate, but he's one of the holdouts in the Senate.
And he's one of the holdouts right now, which is very, very disappointing because what the Democrats really need to do is reopen the government and then have the debate on how exactly to deal with the expiration of the subsidies for the ACA.
But I'm still just kind of, it's almost like mythical history. The budget was passed 3 times when you were in Congress.
It's the first time that was done in 100 years.
Wow.
So I feel like I guess part of a group that actually really accomplished something.
So I guess that was really kind of the unusual time as opposed to us having to deal with what we're dealing with now. But we didn't get the shutdown territory in those previous 100 years.
We didn't get into the shutdown territory. We did have the first government shutdown I ever participated in was during Bill Clinton's presidency, and it was 2 or 3 weeks. But the difference and then I also was involved in a shutdown when I was there when Obama was president. But the big difference was we had the ability to pass a funding measure for the military. That hasn't been done right now. And as of just a couple of days from now, I think that the military is going to start missing their paychecks. The Trump administration was able to cobble together some existing resources.
Right, for that mid-month pay.
Yeah, for the big month pay, but it's going to run out. And it's going to be very, very difficult. Also, with Thanksgiving not that far from us, there's a big concern that if we don't resolve it before then, that there's going to be mayhem in this country because that's when everybody travels to go and see their families. And if the air traffic controllers and the TSA folks decide not to come into work because they're not being paid, it could be really, really horrible.
Interestingly, just before we walked into the studio, I was reading a story about how Senator Ted Cruz has introduced legislation to pay TSA baggage screeners and air traffic controllers, but no legislation for the military.
Well, there's been 2 or 3 votes on the military, and the Democrats won't vote for that.
Yeah.
It'll pass the House. I mean, the House has been able to pass it, but as you know, in the Senate, and a lot of folks out there don't really understand how there's a big difference in the rules of the Senate. In order to get anything to the floor, first you have to get 60 votes. Now that's far more than a simple majority.
Yeah.
And there have been, I think, three Democrats, like Angus King, and I can't remember the other 2 right off the top of my head, but there are 3 Democrats that have sided with Republicans in voting to reopen the government, but it's not enough to get to 60.
Yeah, for that cloture.
Right, for cloture.
Yeah. That's 60 votes. So how do you see us getting out of this shutdown?
Right now, I mean, I believe it's going to happen because common sense is going to ultimately prevail, and people will come to the table and realize they can't continue to let this be happening. But right now, there's no end in sight. Yeah. And right now, the House is still out of session. And, even though they vote on it just about every day, they can't get to closure. And so I can't foresee the exact time when this is going to end. I believe it will end up being the longest shutdown in U.S. history.
Interesting. So I think the longest was 35 days.
Right.
Yeah. Going from
and that was back in Trump 1.
Yeah.
Trump's first administration when he was trying to find the funding to build the wall.
Right.
And it was shut down for 35 days.
Starting right before Christmas and running into January.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know why. I keep coming back, and it's almost like I'm looking back in time to like, why can't we be like you guys were back then in the 90s? What is it? Is it social media? What is it? Just the complete
I think
political
social
landscape?
I think
changed
social
everything?
media and 24/7 news cycles have deeply contributed to the erosion of by any semblance of bipartisanship, because the base on either side gets apoplectic if they see you working with the other side, which is crazy because ultimately we need to make things work. And that's, especially in the Senate, it's going to require a bipartisan atmosphere. There's no way you can solve any problems without some crossover on either side.
And so you think it's going to be the longest shutdown?
I think it's going to be the longest shutdown in American history, and it's not good for anybody. What's interesting is the Republicans have been offering a clean CR, which is basically funding at Biden level funding.
Right.
So it's something the Democrats supported before.
Right.
They're basically using this as a tactic to try to get the Republicans to support legislation basically allowing for the subsidy of the healthcare exchange, the Obamacare, which started during COVID, and it was strictly because of COVID that the subsidies began in the first place, and it's been extended. And a lot of the Republicans are not like, no, because there are folks making 5-6 times the poverty level that are getting these subsidies, and a lot of people feel that's excessive.
So we've talked a lot about the shutdown. We've talked a lot about bipartisanship and how that might be a lost art in Washington. Let's focus on something that I mentioned at the very beginning, and that is the debt. You said you ran on this.
I did.
And it's now $38 trillion. How in the world do we get out of this? Because I remember when it was right around $5 trillion, somebody throwing a stat out there that if you took every billionaire around the world, you took all of their money and all of their property, their factories and everything, you couldn't even pay off a third of the debt back then.
Right.
So we can't tax our way out of this, and we can't lower our spending out of this.
Look, what a lot of Americans don't understand is that the federal budget, the lion's share of it is through entitlement spending and interest on the debt. So Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and debt service, interest on the debt, are about 75% of the federal budget. If you're not willing to at least look at fixing those programs, then you'll never get there. You have to. They're just too voluminous.
Right.
And there ought to be big incentive to go and fix Social Security and Medicare because they're going broke. And their board of trustees on both sides, the actuaries on both sides, who are not partisan people, they simply deal in numbers, have said that within the next 5 to 7 years, they both go bankrupt. Yeah. And so there needs to be some significant changes. And by that, I'm not telling people cutting programs. There's several options that are on the table. One of those options is increasing what Americans pay for FICA taxes. FICA taxes only go up to, I think, $170,000 in salary, and then you don't pay any more. So increasing that cap maybe to $250,000 or $300,000 would probably extend the life of both Social Security and Medicare by about 20 to 25 years, which will give us enough breathing room to fix the problem. And if we did something like that, and see, that's the problem, because we keep borrowing money to pay what we owe recipients of Medicare and Social Security, because it never was in a lockbox. That's the other big mistake that was made. Yeah. It was never in a lockbox, and they were always taking that money out, using it for other government purposes. And so now is the comeuppance. And, one of the other items would be looking at future retirees having a later retirement date. So you have some good options. There's no easy solutions.
Oh, yeah.
There's no more kicking the can down the road. And we need to rip the Band-Aid off, solve the problem. And by doing that, it's a twofer. It solves, the financial stability of Social Security and Medicare for those people who are depending on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also gets you to a balanced budget.
Wow. If there's not political will to end this shutdown, is there political will to do that kind of stuff? And by the way, one of the very few people in all of Congress who's talking about these things in an open, honest way, and I don't mean to endorse him in any way, shape, or form, is David Schweiker.
Yeah, and I respect him immensely. He's a very, very sharp numbers guy, and he and I have had this discussion many, many, many times. The problem is, you know as well as I do that Social Security and Medicare is the third rail of American politics, and everybody is scared to death that if they pop up and they talk about fixing them, that they're going to be attacked by the other side. Oh, you're going to throw the old people out in the snow. You're going to, you're going to starve people. You're going to cut off their health care. No, I've talked about the solutions that are there. Also, one of the things that David talks about is using far more than we do technology to solve healthcare issues.
Yeah.
Diabetes, which is out of control in this country. But there are some technologies that we can employ. I'm actually really excited. I'm nervous about AI on one side, but I'm really excited about the prospects of what it can do for healthcare and solving some of our health issues. And, one of the skepticisms that I have is that the FDA protects, the big pharma industry and does everything that it can to keep things, status quo. There's a lot of technologies and medications that are being used in other countries that we're not using. Yeah. I introduced the right to try legislation that it didn't pass while I was there, but ultimately it got passed and Trump signed it into law. But basically allowing people who have been told they're terminally ill to be able to use medications that may not necessarily have been approved by the FDA, but are deemed safe. They've been through clinical trials.
It's their body.
And it's their body. If they're going to die anyway, let them at least die fighting.
Yeah.
Trying to overcome. Isn't that their right to try?
Right.
And that's what I introduced. But we need to be a lot more willing to use innovation in solving some of our healthcare needs. And healthcare's just run away. I mean, and when you think about some facts that are stark, I think about 95% of what a person spends on healthcare is done so in the last year or two of their life.
Oh, absolutely.
And so let's figure this out. We can do it.
Yeah.
But it takes political will. It takes people dropping their partisan swords and willing to work on behalf of America instead of their party.
Yeah.
On both sides.
But the partisan sword is what makes you your money so that you can stay in office, unfortunately.
You know what? But if you're not willing to do the right thing, even if it makes you lose, then you shouldn't be there.
One last thing on the shutdown. Would you support legislation? Would you bend somebody's ear that's currently in Congress to put forth legislation as soon as the shutdown is done that Congress doesn't get paid during a shutdown?
Absolutely. I get sick to my stomach when I think about our men and women that are fighting for our freedom overseas, missing a paycheck while members of Congress keep getting theirs. I think that's just morally wrong.
All right. Matt Salmon, always.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Little too sensible, I think, for nowadays. Be careful there. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharpe. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.